Let's now get in our executive editor Palki Sharma, who is with us on the broadcast from Washington, D.C. Also with us is our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibbal, with us from Washington, D.C. Coming to you first, Palki, what is your assessment of those remarks that have been delivered by the two leaders right now?
As expected, a very cordial meeting, Molly, between the Vice President of the US and the Prime Minister of India, very much on expected lines. Remember, this is a very, very significant partnership, as much for America, if not more, than for India. This is a time when America's bilateral relationships are under strain, whether it be France, the UK. Of course, there is a considerable amount of criticism on the way they handle the Afghanistan situation. So India is a very important partner that America would want to work with, both in terms of what they want to do with vaccines and the COVID-19 response, as also the strategic moves that Joe Biden wants to make. He wants to shift his focus not in West Asia, not in Afghanistan, but towards further east. So given all of this, it's very important for the American leadership to engage effectively and constructively with India, which is what explains the two very high-level meetings back to back. Today, Prime Minister Modi met Kamala Harris, and tomorrow he's meeting US President Joe Biden in the run-up to that Quad meeting. So understandably and very much on expected lines, it was a meeting of friends, you could say. And this is the first time that Prime Minister Modi is interacting with Kamala Harris in this capacity. He has worked with Joe Biden in the past. When he came in 2014, Biden was Vice President. But this was also a meeting to sort of get to know the US Vice President, who's also of Indian origin.
Absolutely. The Indian Prime Minister meeting the first Indian origin Vice President of the United States for the first time. Let's get in Siddhant into this conversation as well. Siddhant, a lot of those aspects of the joint statement are crucial, be it the common will to tackle climate change, the urgency for climate action, the COVID-19 partnership as well, and talking about the deliverables from that partnership, 1 billion COVID-19 jabs to be manufactured in India. That's something that the American president also has outlined to be a cornerstone of the Quad partnership.
Well, yes, in the opening statement, both the leaders talked about issues like COVID crisis, climate change. VP Harris, of course, lauded India starting its vaccine maitri or vaccine export initiative. But above all, it is the symbolism, the optics of both leaders standing together. Remember, she is the highest ranking Indian American in the administration. She is the Vice President. She welcoming the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Prime Minister Narendra Modi extending a special invite to her to come to India. This can be, of course, a homecoming, a second homecoming, to use the phrase, but largely this is a moment for many Indian Americans in terms of their role in the American society. There are 4 million Indian Americans, many Indian Americans in the Biden administration. So it is the optics and, of course, the symbolism of the meeting. But by and large, there are issues like Indo-Pacific, about how both countries can work together amidst an increasingly aggressive China, on, of course, the Quad vaccine initiative, under which vaccines will be manufactured here from America to India, and, of course, the logistical and the financial support by the Japanese and the Australians.
Indeed, it has been described as a coming of age for the Indian diaspora, Palki, that we have been talking about as well, with the help of our experts, better understanding the significance of the Indian diaspora in the United States. While you've been there, you've been speaking to analysts, also talking about where the relationship between India and the US is headed. What is the broad sense that you've got at this point?
Well, broadly speaking, we all know that the Indian diaspora is one of the most up-and-coming and one of the most important, I wouldn't want to say just vote banks, but important contributors to American society, whether it be the business end of it or the health system in the US. Indian Americans have been very much involved in the American society and systems. As far as the US political landscape is concerned, India is one country, one relationship on which there is bipartisan consensus. Both Democrats and Republicans are very keen on seeing a strong relationship with India. And if you see Prime Minister Modi's tenure in office, in 2014 when he took over, it was a Democratic President Barack Obama and Joe Biden was the Vice President. And they got off on to a very good start with Modi addressing the Indian diaspora and many Americans as well at the Madison Square event. And from there to Barack Obama's visit to India as a chief guest once and then one more time. And then, of course, the Trump administration that we saw, Modi and Trump worked very well. The last time the UNGA happened, we had a Howdy Modi event. And now again, a Democrat is in office. So you can see the continuity of policy. Of course, the difference is that with Donald Trump, the relationship was a little more transactional. When Modi and Biden talk, or when Modi and Kamala Harris talk, they talk about values, they talk about democracy, they talk about multilateralism. And there is a lot of convergence in their strategic goals and their policies. So there is a lot of ground to be covered, yes, but there is a lot going for this relationship, and that is reflected in the engagements and the dialogues that we've had from both sides. Of course, India will also have to look at some tangibles. You mentioned vaccine, and vaccine is very important. Vaccine Maitri has been a cornerstone of India's COVID response and its contribution to how the world has dealt with it. But India is also looking at discrimination from its so-called democratic partners and allies, including the US and the UK, on travel restrictions. So those are assurances that government will have to seek at some level on how they're going to move forward when it comes to vaccine partnerships as well.
Indeed. And Siddhant, talking about the urgency for climate action that the American Vice President also just touched upon while delivering that joint statement with the Indian Prime Minister, finding common ground between the two sides on the issue of climate change. What is the sense that you've got?
Well, finding common ground, one can easily gauge it with the two visits of the US climate envoy John Kerry to Delhi. His last visit was just late earlier this month. And of course, both sides are working on it. The Glasgow summit is also set to happen very soon in November. And we know that just recently, one of the key events of the US President Joe Biden was the climate virtual summit, in which Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was the key speaker, and he talked about the initiatives India has been taking. India, of course, has been taking initiatives like the International Solar Alliance, which basically harnesses the energy of the sun, and also making sure that there are more renewables in the country. One of the key things that India has been talking about is that there needs to be more climate financing by developed countries toward developing countries like India, and India is seeking commitment from Washington and the Western world on that, and we do expect some kind of consensus on that. Of course, US is keen that India announces zero emission target as well. India has been saying that India has been doing a lot in terms of cutting that. In fact, the Indian Prime Minister many times has reiterated at various multilateral forums that how India is not only fulfilling its Paris climate targets, but also exceeding those targets, and the only country in the G20 grouping that has been able to do so. So there is complementarity, and of course both countries are keen that how this convergences and the complementarities can be taken forward, whether it's climate issue or whether it's any other issue.
Indeed, and the Indian-US relationship, their natural allies is what the joint statement also outlined. We're leaving it there for the moment. Palki Sharma and Siddhant Sibbal, thanks very much for getting us a better sense of that statement that was delivered just a short while back by the Indian Prime Minister and the American Vice President. A lot of crucial aspects, be it climate change, be it the COVID-19 partnership, and the Indian Prime Minister also inviting Vice President Kamala Harris to visit India. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.